must say I'm slightly starstruck because on your LinkedIn, if people check it out, and I've been some pretty nice places with some pretty important and interesting people.
We are there in that room for a reason. Always straight to the point. The focus is what is the problem we are solving here. Machines are machines, so as clever they can be, bottom line, they are machines. They are to be used.
One thing that comes across with this is you have to be quite ruthless in some ways, I guess. Certainly have to be strong in your own convictions, I think.
That constructive feedback, you don't just ask for it, you build it.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the GCS Connect Leaders Series. We've got Gianluca Riccio today. He is primarily the co-chair of the Finance Committee for Business at OECD, which is the Organization of Economics and Development, a very important organization. And he also has another senior role within the Lloyds Banking Group. So we're really honored to have him on the conversation. He's someone that has networked, met and talked to very many senior leaders. So you'll hear some quite famous names in here today and his experiences of them. And it takes those experiences and really helps us to understand what makes a top leader. What are the key attributes of that? So if you want to be a top leader, this is the one for you to listen to. One thing I'd like to say is the views expressed by Gianluca, they're definitely his own views that he is presenting in his personal capacity and not necessarily of the companies that he represents. But I'm sure that you'll enjoy those views and find very, very useful. So without further ado, here's Gianluca. Thank you. Gianluca, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Very, very much looking forward to this conversation. We have Gianluca Riccio here. He is the chair of the Finance Committee for the OECD corporate function, the business side, not the government's. We've been speaking to him over the last few months, and I'm very, very excited to kind of have you on the conversation, Gianluca. I know you've got a lot of interesting stuff to tell us about what you know within leadership and within business. So very, very welcome to the GCS Leaders Series podcast.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Good stuff. So Gianluca, if you could just give a little bit of a flavor of what you do. You also work for Lloyds Banking Group as well. So you wear a few very, very important hats, but just give us a flavor of what you do and how you come into this, where you're at in your career at the moment and the types of people you meet and the types of things that you get involved with.
Yes, sure. So, I do have various roles. The one you were referring to, I'm the chair of the Finance Committee at the Business OECD, which is the business side of the OECD, which drives globally policies that then drive the standards we all follow. As chair of the Finance Committee, I also sit at the G20, obviously, B20 side, the business side always, and where this year I was co-chair of the Brazilian presidency for the Finance and Infrastructure Task Force. As you said, my main role is in Lloyds. In Lloyds, I covered multiple roles across risk management and strategy and strategic transformation. And at the moment, my focus is on data.
Fantastic. And obviously something that many of the conversations we've had within these podcasts is all linked into data, because a lot of what's happening in the technology world at the moment is how people are using data, getting value out of data, but also securing that data and making sure through cyber security that it's used in the right way and not by nefarious people. So I'm sure we'll link into that. But obviously you mentioned there these gatherings that you've been to. I must say I'm slightly starstruck because obviously you've been kind of, on your LinkedIn, if people check it out, and obviously we'll tag you in. You've been some pretty nice places with some pretty important and interesting people. So when my first question really, and obviously we talk about leadership a lot within this, but when you meet people who are leaders, like political leaders, business leaders, and we're talking about the much higher above than me or something like that, a real business titan or a political titan. What are the key things to you that comes across, when you meet, I don't know, I see like a TV like Barack or someone like that. I don't know if you've met that sort of person, but what are the key things that come across to you about those types of people? And I think that's a great place to start for us as leaders. Like, what do you think, from your experience, makes one of these top quality leaders?
So the setup is always the more senior they are, the more formal the setup is,
Yeah. Okay.
and generally is there is a topic and there is a reason why we are meeting them. So they generally, and I use the word generally because obviously, as every human being, there are a big variety of characters and approaches. But generally, all the conversations are very focused on the topic we are discussing. And depending on the individual, there is a degree of granularity and attention to it. But clearly, has to be a topic that is in their radar. So there have been various conversations, and frequently this conversation move from the the formal table to the more informal conversation, and frequently the informal one are the most productive because the formal one have to follow protocol, some specific step, an agenda. The informal one, you manage to have a more open conversation about the topic, and generally you have the opportunity to explain the element, and is a bit to follow a bit what the room you are given, and that one changes case by case. So I had meetings where did follow only the formal agenda and had nothing of informal. And I had other cases where the informal went bigger than the formal one. And generally, in all the cases where the latter happened, was because the topic was of very deep interest of them, and generally followed with actions afterwards, which had wider impacts. So there is no formula, but for sure the only um, consistent element is the topic you are covering. It's not about you. It's not about meeting them. It's not about an autograph. It's about a topic that is being debated.
So it's a very much, it sounds to me like very much a kind of a focus thing. That you know, people like that are very much like, right, I'm doing this now, I'm doing this now. And you get an amount of their time, but they want to focus in. There's no like small talk or something like that. You get straight to the point and talk about it.
Always straight to the point. Some small talk may come at the end if the room is has happened in few cases, but has happened. But the focus is what is the problem we are solving here. We are there in that room for a reason, and that is the reason we are discussing.
I mean, I always sometimes look at myself and think about that, as I kind of tend to generally kind of flow off on tangents and that sort of stuff. So maybe I'm not organized and focused enough in my leadership. So I think that goes back to this kind of 5-minute manager and like parceling out your time and that sort of thing. Now I know that the conversations that you've had and the sessions, particularly that you've attended recently, have been quite linked into kind of leadership in this current world, right? How do we show leadership when there's climate change, when there's economic difficulties, trade wars, etc., real wars. So I know that there was one thing that you wanted to talk about, was a kind of an interesting session that you kind of went to recently, which was kind of talking about leadership in these particular kind of areas. I think this was the Brazil session. So when you come into thinking about leadership now, from what you've heard from these different sessions, what do you think the key elements? I mean, that's obviously the purpose of the session, right? To talk about leadership. So what are the key elements that you take for a modern leader, again, coming from these kind of upper echelons of leadership, that you think are really useful for our listeners to hear?
So, in a way, leadership is something extremely complicated and extremely simple at the same time. You are dealing with people, not with robots. So, first of all, uh, there is the need of establishing a personal relationship, and because you have a human being there, and they which have some common interest in your conversation, either because you're doing the work together, it's your boss or whatever, or the example we just talked about it. The reason why I am in the room discussing something with a state leader or a state president and so on is for a topic. So there is an element of interest, but there is a person behind it. So when I think about kind of core elements of leadership, I always end up back on three core pieces. In a way, very simple. First of all, is to have a vision, to have a strategy. So a target, but is absolutely clear towards you, your team, the person you are talking to. Are you looking at the same thing? Do you have what is the objective you are targeting? And understanding that that vision is critical to click in whatever conversation. Either you are planning your next 5 years or you are having a 10 minutes conversation. Is always important. Where are we going? The second, and I will spend a bit more time on each of them, but in summary, the second one is communication. And communication, which is consultation, is talking to someone, is not passing a message or is not delivering a message, but is talking to someone. This is why the human elements is so important. Together with communication comes agility and adaptability. So the moment you have a vision, you communicate, the world changes, the things move. And the moment is clear that final direction and is clear that you create that communication linkage, then you need to be able to adapt to whatever, to have the agility to adapt to the changing circumstances. And number three, which obviously is more thinking about teams and your world rather than these conversations, is empowerment and account, which comes together, always comes together with accountability. So you cannot deliver a strategy, a vision, if everything has to depend on you, because at that point, you have robots that try to execute, but at some point becomes a series of dry orders to be executed, and you never get the outcome. So the communication, if it's collaboration, means you expect the feedback, but to take on board that feedback. The mistake that frequently happens that the feedback is done more because it needs to be done, but you don't really believe in it. No, you need to genuinely believe in it.
Well, I think that's where that rounded leader is what's important now, and specifically communication. I've done probably about 95 of these sessions, and the people I speak to are leaders are generally are always good communicators. They're all very different personalities, but they can come on and talk 45 to 60 minutes about their vision, their targets, where they want to be, how they build their team. So I think being able to communicate that is such an important thing. I want to just go back to one point you made there, just in terms of your leading people. And obviously another thing, particularly in the last 12 months, we've talked about we're not robots, is obviously the kind of the coming of AI and how these tools get used and what this might mean in the future. When you're talking about with leaders, is there something that they kind of are thinking about, talking about? Maybe it's one of the topics that you've discussed, is will leadership change when maybe it's not just people that you're leading?
So AI, as you just referred to, there is, and people can probably find it on LinkedIn. There is a beautiful video of Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, on exactly this topic. It's probably 1 minute long, but it's excellent. And Jack Ma is saying, was talking about education, and is saying what schools need to teach is people to think. They need to teach the art, the music, the basically the soul of individuals. If we limit ourselves in knowledge, AI will always beat us. It's not just a question of dry knowledge. Is that emotive intelligence that links knowledge to actions, and that is it's was very well done, and that is one of the key when we think about artificial intelligence. Is if we think about the industrial revolution 200 years ago, people were thinking, okay, machines are completely replacing us, and so on. Machines are machines. So as clever they can be, bottom line, they are machines. They are to be used. The question is how they get used and how you leverage them and how you progress on them. And that comes from something that machine will never be able to replace, which is the emotional side, what is called the emotive intelligence. And that is fundamental, that is very human. And I doubt any artificial intelligence will be able to replace that innovative and emotional element, which actually is not a question of just smiling or crying, but is a question of appreciating the value of certain information and what you make of it.
And that kind of links into the three things you said. So, having a vision and a target, robots, AI don't really care about the vision and the target. They just care about the task, right? It's people that care where we're going. If you think about agility and adaptation, that's again something that human beings should be able to be agile and adapt to different things happening outside of their control, whereas a robot wouldn't be. And obviously communication is not, it's known as like people's best thing. So I also love the fact that you were talking there about music, art, and the soul there. And as an Italian, Gianluca, you must think like, this is perfect for Italian people in the future. Like, this is
Not
you,
only for Italian,
right?
for every human being.
That's
But
why, surely that's what Italians are the best at, isn't it? Plus food. So yeah.
but if you can, there was, I don't remember who did it, but did a nice test on AI and put a simple question in. Can we eliminate cancer? How can we eliminate cancer? And the response from the, I don't know they were using, it was yes, kill all human beings. So yes, it's factually correct, because if you have no more human beings, you have no more cancer. But obviously, it's not a route that anybody will ever
It's not an
consider.
optimal outcome, is it? So you're kind of like, I could have thought of that one, but yes, yeah, that's right.
So, but that is exactly the difference when you were talking about the vision, the direction, where are we going? That is, we can laugh about it because it's laughable, but actually there is a very important element in it, which is the one you were referring to, because we have the trajectory, the vision. Obviously, you are not going to eliminate all human beings, and but a machine will not have that element which we make as realistic and targeting something that is realistic.
So one of the things we've spoken about, obviously, kind of coming into this conversation, is the diverse roles that you have in different kind of capacities, different organizations. I'm just quite interested when you look at leadership in these different organizations. Again, do you see much different? Do you have to kind of come at different types of projects in different ways? Is that something you're quite aware of? Or do you generally take on a project in the same way? Like, this is how Gianluca deals with this? Or do you kind of adapt according to the circumstances?
So I will say that Gianluca takes its project consistently, which is not the same way. But your question is wider than that. It's not so important about Gianluca. It's more important about what we see outside. And you may have different projects, you may have different cases, but in the end, I think the three that I just referred to are common across almost any small or massive task you can face. When we were talking last time, I referred to a good example that I think is quite interesting to look at, which goes back in history, so we can be more objective in looking at it. And
We're a big fan. I'm a big fan of Rest is History podcast. So any history reference that we can get in, they're my kind of superheroes. So if we are going to come into a good history reference now, aren't we, Gianluca? So
yes,
let's pretend we're on the Rest is History just for 5 minutes. Let's go.
yes, let's go into history for 5 minutes. But the lessons learned, the reason why I think is a good case is because what I'm referring is a big historical moment, but you can apply to a small project. The piece I'm referring is 100 years ago, during the First World War. So probably not everybody looking at this, listening to this podcast may know, but in 1917 was in the full of First World War, and the different sides had, among others, Italy against the Austro-Hungarian. And in 1917, October 1917, the Italian army had their biggest loss ever, the biggest defeat ever in history. But when I talk about big defeat, I mean really seriously big. So generally in battle terms, you have a defeat when the other side gains 1 mile, couple of miles, and so on. And if it gets to 5 miles, it's a big defeat. In that defeat, they went, the Austro-Hungarian moved for about 100 miles, over 100 miles. So this gives a sense of how seriously big there were. Tens of thousands of people killed, soldiers killed. And the attitude of the Italian army was so down to that basically everybody was saying the war is finished, just try to save ourselves and go back home. 1 year later, 1918, October 1918, Vittorio Veneto, the same army had one of the biggest victory in history. And that victory basically closed the First World War. So what is quite interesting is how it's possible that one army can move in 1 year, in one solar year, from the worst possible defeat to the biggest victory. What has changed? What made the difference? Obviously, there is not only one reason. There are a lot of so all historians will forgive me because I will focus on one aspect. Obviously, there are a lot of other military and political aspects that
And
supported it.
just for historical purposes, this is the Battle of Caporetto, isn't it? I believe.
Yeah, the 117 is the Battle of Caporetto. Caporetto is a little town in Slovenia, and the Italian army had moved into Slovenia, and the Battle of Vittorio Veneto is full Italy in Veneto, and about 100 miles backwards into Italy. And one critical difference was that the general in charge changed. The general of Caporetto of the defeat was Cadorna, which was a very famous, important general, and was replaced by a pretty unknown general called Armando Diaz. Obviously, pretty unknown for the news of the time, but obviously was a general, so was not completely unknown. And who was about 10 years younger, so was not that different in terms of age, but had a management style that was completely different, was a century of difference. The very first thing that Diaz did was to sleep with the troops, where Cadorna was always staying several miles away from the troops. And when we talk about communication, Cadorna is alleged to have said when his direct reports were telling him we should talk to the troops, Cadorna has been allegedly saying why soldiers thinks soldiers have just to shoot and do what I say. Diaz had a completely different approach. Humans. So first of all, the strategy. Soldiers in 1917 they didn't know why they were there. They were there because they were told to do so, and because you had to do it. They were moving into today's Slovenia, and they had no clue why they were doing it. They were doing because they have been ordered to do it. That's it. Diaz brought a vision in front of them. Brought a vision saying, over that hill, there are families like your families that are captured. So you have to save your families. And so there was a vision, a simple vision, but there was a vision. The second one was, and was a shared vision. It's not enough that the general has it, but was a vision that went into the soul of the soldier, and they believed in it. It's not enough to communicate, to tell. It needs to be brought to them. This brings us to communication. And communication is not dry orders. It's collaboration, it's consultation. You want to know what they think about it. If you read the books about 1917, you were told to shoot north. Actually, the enemy was on east, and if you were shooting on the other side, you went to court martial. So you had to do what you have been told, full stop. The way the communication changed, and this brings the third layer, empowerment, was the objective is to take that hill. Now, there is a soldiers there, there is a captain there. They are in charge of taking the hill. I communicate all the information, not obviously all the communication about every front, but the communication regarding that hill. I'll pass all this information, but then I empower you. You take me over that hill. And there is a task, there is an objective, and there is in itself the agility and the adaptability of whatever changes. This brought the Battle of Montegrappa and then Vittorio Veneto, which was a massive victory for the Italian army, because was of people that were empowered. They knew they knew where they were going. They knew what they were doing, and they had the authority. Some of the anecdotes that are around it is that one captain said, okay, shoot as much as you can in that direction. But one soldier told him, wait, we risk to go to court martial because we are not supposed to shoot so much because it's very expensive. And this captain said, I'll pay with my own money. Just do it. And let's progress in that direction. And that paid off. Their role of empowerment. And they really felt empowered. That in 1917 would have never ever happened.
Yeah.
So what is interesting out of this element of obviously is history, but you can turn things around, but it needs to be genuine, and it needs to be genuine strategy, genuine communication, genuine empowerment.
And that's something that we see throughout business. So I guess that's why history is always such a great leader, because generally you can see the whole arc of the narrative, right? You can kind of look back and think, well, this led to this. Whereas when you're in business, you're kind of in the thick of it, right? You can't see the narrative. But I guess what you're saying is you have to bring the narrative out. You have to link certain episodes together, don't you? To give people something to believe in, that they feel this is part of it and this is why we're doing this. Is this something that you see in your conversations?
Yes, you always see it in whatever level.
Mm.
And the problem, which is not that we are silly, but it's totally human. when things don't go well, we tend to justify it and say, but he told me that I had to follow this and so on. This is where far history is very helpful, because there is no emotional attachment. And you can see what actually happened and what are the core elements that really made the difference. But those elements you can apply to a very small project. So there is no project that always goes to plan. as you started absolutely bang on the plan. Things do happen. Things because you made a mistake in your plan, because there are new and you didn't expect. But do you have your vision and your strategy clear? You know where you are going. How those activity, because one mistake we frequently do is we focus on the activity, what I have to do next month or next 3 months, how these activities link to that direction. And therefore, even if these activities have to change pattern, ultimately, am I my trajectory is am I keeping my trajectory? And that is critical. But the general in charge, the CEO or whoever, he cannot think for all of it. So that is why, but that CEO has the responsibility of sharing that vision and making sure that vision is completely acquired by the individuals, and and then distilled in the different activities. And this is where the communication is very important. The mistake that frequently happens is that using probably not a nice term, but effective, becomes propaganda.
Yeah.
You become just stating the almost the obvious. The moment communication becomes propaganda, fails. It has communication to be genuine, needs to be appreciated and then fully endorsed by the people. But in order to have that endorsement, you need the consultation. So they need to feel part. So they need to be able to challenge it. Not everybody's happy to have you challenging them.
Yeah, exactly. One of the challenges that we have within business. And I guess, again, talking through the types of people that you work with and talk to, the bigger the organization, the more important the projects, the more powerful the leader, the more difficult it gets to kind of really communicate those narratives. And you see that, don't you, in the day-to-day life with politicians or business leaders. If you're in a room with 5 or 10 people, or a team of 5 to 10 people, it's quite easy to keep on narrative, isn't it? Because there's not too many people that can miscommunicate. Everyone's listening. Whereas the bigger the project gets, the bigger the audience gets, the more difficult it is to stay on 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 piece. And obviously, you've got a very large role within your banking community and that sort of thing. So what do you try to do? What are the kind of particular challenges you have within these major projects that you work on in order to keep that narrative on track?
The main challenge is keeping the narrative on track.
Right. Yeah.
So is frequently is maintaining the strategic direction, exactly because a lot of things do happen. It's normal that they do happen, and it's also normal and natural that we get distracted because we have to solve the immediate problem we have, and that feels very tangible, very concrete to us, where the strategy, the vision is a nice word. And but that is valid for small and big things. So talking about the very senior leaders that I've met, so one person that everybody knows and is not in charge anymore was Angela Merkel. And sitting with her, she really wanted to understand what were the challenges. So there was, and there were actions out of it. But what was interesting there was the genuine wanting to understand what the challenge is. Obviously, not the granular little thing, but what was the concept, why it was important, and putting in the perspective of a leader that has such a wide responsibility. What does it mean for a country? The same is having clarity yourself about that strategy. So everybody talks today about the Chinese, the Silk Road, and so on. No? In 2016, I was sitting in the room with Xi Jinping that was presenting the Silk Road, and what is happening today is exactly what he said in 2016, and so in what you could see there, not only he really believed in it, but you the way he was describing it had absolute clarity about what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. Now we can agree, disagree. That is a separate conversation, but the clarity was there. When I see things happening, I can perfectly relate to that whatever it was, half an hour, 45 minutes there, and so that was very well communicated, but was very communicated not just because he may be an excellent communicator, but because he strongly believed in it, and he saw not just this idea, but the steps that we will take place.
Then, like when you see those types of things, you know, it's the strength of belief that you have as well. You know, you one thing that comes across with this is you have to be to really, really get to this level. Like you said about like how you take your time, that you said about making decisions, you have to be quite ruthless in some ways, I guess. You have to be certainly have to be a very strong person, strong in your own convictions, I think, you know, to really kind of reach those levels. And that's something I see for myself within business. Yeah. As a leader, people expect you to empower them, but also to make decisions when it's necessary, you know, to focus on certain things. And I guess ruthless might be the wrong word, but you know, it's definitely tough, isn't it? You know, you're making the tough calls. Would you agree with that?
Yes, but I will be very careful on the word ruthless, because look at Cadorna and Diaz.
Yeah.
Cadorna was definitely ruthless.
Yeah. Okay.
But there is
Yeah.
no question. The he allegedly he was more worried about how many arms were lost because they were very expensive, than how many people died. So what you want more ruthless than that? And the Diaz had obviously a very clear vision, and he delivered on it. So we can absolutely agree he had a very clear vision. But he wanted to have the people on board. To have the people on board, so you need that clarity. You need to take forward. But if you are just ruthless, people obey, but they don't believe in it. The strength of the leader and the strength of that communication, no, is that it's consultation. So you bring them, so they believe in it more than yourself. So then that has really happened. They share that vision. Obviously, what is not everybody in a bank can have the same vision of a CEO. Otherwise, we will be 60,000 CEOs. Doesn't help anybody.
Mm.
It's like suitable that there are millions of managers. You need one manager, but everybody needs to believe in that strategy. Because if they believe in the strategy, mistakes will happen. Not may happen, will happen. But they know what all are going through. If, on the other hand, that manager, that CEO just imposes orders, it may get a couple of right, but sooner or later, he's a human being as well. We make mistakes,
Yeah.
and ultimately will fail because nobody really believes in what they're doing. They're just doing what they're told to do.
So it's keeping that narrative clear, keeping it focused, but at the same time making people believe in it in a good way. You know, that you is the whole bring a horse to water type thing. You know, you want to
Yes,
make
absolutely.
sure that people are, again, to use another analogy, drinking the Kool-Aid, that they feel they're part of this narrative. And that's what you see from the best leaders, isn't it? You know, the people that really do lead people on a direction, on a journey, is because they've brought everyone along with them, haven't they?
Yes, and it's not easy, and that is what, in my personal view, makes a big difference, because and makes a difference between successful and so on. This is why I like the example of Cadorna and Diaz, because that is exactly what happened. You have two very big successful generals, and with completely different approach and so on, and one led to the biggest defeat in history, and the other one to the biggest victory in history. So
Yeah, in a very similar context with very similar people, a completely different outcome. So when you come over your own self within your own role, when you come across these kind of challenges, and what do you do? How when you're finding it difficult to keep to the narrative, that you're maybe feeling your communication is not coming across right, that there's a problem that you've got to adapt to. What are your kind of go-to ways to fix this, to move things forward?
there is never an answer. I believe in teams, and in the genuine sense of the word team. Team is made of views, of perspectives, and hierarchy in any institution is needed. But when becomes dry hierarchy becomes useless, because sometimes the most junior person may have the right answer to take the things forward. But in order to surface that input, you need to give them the confidence. They need to feel not comfortable in having that conversation, in bringing something appreciated, that generally appreciated. There is a lot of people that say, yes, I ask questions, but maybe they are on the phone doing something else. It's not a question to ask questions. It's a question to wanting to learn from. And there was a guy that was probably most people don't remember him. His name was Rudy Bogne. He was the CEO of wealth management in UBS 20 years ago, and he made a little bit history because as he was appointed CEO, the Financial Times dedicated to this move a full page, and he said, "I need before I start my role, I need 1 year sabbatical because I need to go back to school and take." I don't remember if it was a PhD or so on derivatives, because I cannot accept that a lot of my junior know far more than me. So I'm clearly behind the curve, and I have to get up to speed. And the article of the Financial Times, I don't remember word by word, but was saying something like a CEO that admits what are his limits and is ready to put his weakness front and learn and go back to school literally,
Mm.
and in order to run, and it went very very well. So um, the importance of understanding what is the knowledge that is around you, and those leaders that can bring that knowledge out of your team generally are the one that can find easily the solution, because they bring the vision, they bring the direction, they know what we need to target, but they don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I only have a very limited amount of answers. Is the team together that actually is able to deliver that?
So the real advice there, I guess, is, when you're struggling, is not to to necessarily put more pressure on yourself, but to really understand that you've got a team around you, talk to that team, but also I think what you're saying there is to listen intently to what they're saying, to really, like, right, these are the problems. This is where we're trying to get to. This is where I don't think we can, and then talk it out. And I guess, controlling that situation, controlling the different opinions, because not everyone's going to agree. trying to find
Obviously,
consensus.
nobody's going to agree. If
You know?
everybody was agreeing on absolutely everything, we didn't need half of the workforce. Everybody knew exactly what to do.
Exactly.
So we are, particularly if we think about transformation and so on, you are transforming because you have to change something.
Yeah.
So nobody knows what is the right answer.
That's right. And in
Um,
transformation, particularly, you've got different departments who have got coming into it with different points of view, right? I'm sure the risk department and the sales department clash heads all
and
the time, right?
different objectives,
Mm.
because the
Narratives.
business has narratives, and the role of risk is to ensure that the bank is safe and is protected and does the business in the right way. The role of the business is to make more business, and so the perspective is different, but it's the synthesis that is the important piece. And successful companies are those that are able to make that the synthesis. So knowing your people and knowing the inputs of your people and knowing why and where it comes from, but giving back to communication and consultation, giving them an empowerment, giving them that confidence, because you do not want people just disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing. In the same way, you don't want yes people, because neither of them will actually take you forward. You want to constructive feedback, but that constructive feedback, you don't just ask for it, you build it. And you build it not out of one session saying, I would like constructive feedback. You build it out of reciprocal respect that you build over the years, over trust. The core element is mutual trust. And that one takes time to build.
Yeah. So just to synthesize this down as we draw towards the end of the conversation, from what you've learned from your own career, but also from the people that you've met, what would be the key like 3 pieces of advice that you would give to other business leaders there that's looking to be as impressive and successful as yourself, but also the other people that you've come into contact with?
I will not put myself as an example to follow. There are many other much better
Sure.
examples. I will go back to my 3 points. So have a clear vision and share that vision. So starting from, you are talking to people, not to robots. So share that vision. Make sure that that vision is endorsed, truly endorsed, and communicate. Communicate and consult. So genuine communication, not propaganda. And then empower. Empowerment means they may do the things in a different way than the way you thought. As far as the trajectory is the same one and you are getting there, then it's fine. Doesn't need to be the way you had thought about it. So across all 3, it comes the human element, and with the human element comes trust. Trust is not just a word. Trust is not just I do what you told me. Trust is mutual, and the mutual respect of we are rowing in the same direction, but things may be done in a slightly different way as far as we are progressing together towards it.
And do you think, over the next 10, 20 years that you can see changes in leadership coming about? Or do you think this is pretty much universal from 1917 to 1918 to 2024 to 2074? Do you think those 3 key pieces of advice are going to remain the same?
I think the 3 will remain the same. There was a beautiful book in the 1500 written by a philosopher called Giambattista Vico. In 1500, he was saying the book was called basically History Repeats Itself. So translated, people do always the same mistakes, and so because they are human beings. So that was in the 1500. We are in the 2000 and 500 years on, And a lot of what we have seen in the last couple of centuries happened in some shape and form before. So this is why history is so important. And unfortunately, because we are human, we tend to do similar. The scenario changes, the topic changes, but the humans are there. So what I try to do, I'm very far from me to advise others, but what I try to do is to really build teams towards common objectives that everybody believes in it.
Fantastic. Well, Gianluca, it's been wonderful to hear some very informative stories, but also some real kind of wisdom about leadership. And yeah, I think we all none of us want to have our own personal Cabretto, and we all want to be Armando Diaz. I think is we want to win, we don't want to lose. So yeah, I think we can all take some really good advice from that. So thank you very much today, Gianluca.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.